Thank you for coming to this talk. I'm going to talk about one of my favourite subjects, which is television and the use of television in teaching. If you're of a certain age, and I can see some of us are, then you think immediately of TV and teaching as being the Open University type broadcasts of the 1970s. And this was pastiche here in the Harry and Paul's Story of the Twos. Unfortunately, we haven't got time this morning to actually show any of the clips that I'm going to refer to, but I put URLs in there, and the slides are already on SlideShare if you want to have a look there, and you can see the links, and those go through to the clips within the Boxer Broadcast program, which we're going to be talking about primarily. We've heard already about the possibility of using multimedia. I'm a big enthusiast for the fact that we should be making more use of multimedia in teaching. It's a very natural way in which students engage with learning materials. And in different activities, I've been involved with developing authentic assessment activities in which students produce videos and do news analysis. But I'm talking this morning particularly about work using Boxer Broadcasts, which is who's familiar with Boxer Broadcasts already? It'd be helpful to know. So some are, but some aren't. Okay, so let me introduce Bob. I have it on good authority that Bob is first called Bob because it was in homage to the a character in Blackadder, and they retrofixed the words Boxer Broadcast to the name afterwards. But Bob is an on-demand service, so there is now available 65 UK and international channels, so there can be some use in language teaching if that's an area that you're involved in. There are already over 2 million records of TV and radio shows within the Bob system, and it's available to subscribing institutions, and there wouldn't be much point me mentioning that here today if it wasn't for the fact that Lincoln is a subscribing institution. One of the unfortunate limitations is that due to copyright regulations, it's not applicable for distance learning courses if the students are coming from outside the UK. So that is one of the unfortunate restrictions on the use of the system. But aside from that, it's a very powerful learning and teaching tool. So in terms of the interface, just for those who haven't been familiar with Bob, and this did change about 18 months ago, so if you used it before that but not recently, then this will look differently. But there is a user interface where you can find programs that are currently on, look forwards for the next 30 days, and 20 days and back for the last 30 days. And you can choose programs from there. And I've deliberately chosen a screenshot that shows some of the less obvious choices. So Quest, Really, Rai News, so you've got some international news, Russia Today, S4C for Welsh users, and then Sky News as well. And there's, as I say, 65 channels in total that you can pick up on. There is also the option of a very powerful search tool, which now increasingly uses transcript searching for, if it's a TV program, you can get, the subtitles can be searched. So that gives a huge number of appropriate hits and obviously some inappropriate ones as well. Unfortunately, radio programs are not supported in the same way. So it's sometimes useful if you're looking for radio resources to use the sister site, which is TRIL, the Television Radio Index for Learning and Teaching. And I can talk more about that in questions if people are interested in that. So you've got your search, and you can do some quite powerful searches, selecting whether you want just the titles of the program, metadata that's been provided by the broadcasters, or whether it includes transcripts and time and channel of broadcast, those kinds of features. So I want to do, for the next section of the presentation, I want to just demonstrate some of the uses that I've made of materials within Boxer Broadcast, so different ways of using broadcast media, and then I'll introduce you finally to a resource that we've been developing over the last couple of years. So one of the most obvious ways, I guess, that we could use TV is in capturing information that's from documentaries, so factual information coming through from there. This is an example where I have a session talking about a technique called pre-implantation genetic selection, which is one of the forms of PGD, and it could be easy just to talk to the students about that, but why talk to them about it when you can actually show somebody selecting chromosomes on the basis of the colour match that they have. So that's a clip used there in an introductory session there. I also use clips as scene setters, so you'll see, you might recognise this as a scene from Die Another Day, in which Bond and Emma are talking about gene therapy, and he explains that gene therapy is that we're getting new identities, taking DNA from runaways, the people that won't be missed. That's the kind of the premise of what's going on. Sufficient apparently to turn a Korean into a British aristocrat, and clearly that's hopelessly wrong. So I deliberately use this clip because it's so wrong. It humorously sets up a discussion of what gene therapy actually does involve, and so we can go on and think more about that. And I do use some other media for that, including a more appropriate clip from Horizon. Alternatively, again, this is a clip from Holby City, in which Dr. Abra is explaining to the patient Pete that although he's run out of options on the regular procedures for a kidney transplant, if he's willing to take part in a experimental and slightly controversial technique, then he's willing to give him a pig's kidney instead. And so we show the clip and then set up a discussion in which I asked the students to think about both the ethics and the science of xenotransplantation. Would it be appropriate for Pete to be involved in this research? Is it going to be a useful and effective way of him overcoming his current kidney difficulties? And then just to talk in slightly more detail about this particular example. So this is, I use a clip from the series Brainiacs Science Abuse, which those of you who are familiar with science documentaries will know is not the top quality of science documentary presentation. But I use this in a year one tutorial, and we show the clip, and again, I'm not going to show the clip right now, but I ask students, and I prime them with these questions before they see the clip, to look out for what are examples of good experimental design and what are examples of less good experimental design. And so they're alerted then to what to keep an eye out for. And we then, as I say, we watch the clip, and there are some links there that will take you through to these if this is something in your area of interest. And we then discuss what was good about the particular experiment that was shown, which isn't very much, and what was poor about it. And then I asked them with their neighbours to develop a better better way of thinking about how you could smell fear. And so they come up with some good suggestions for how things could improve. We pull those together. And then I also, in that session, discussed with them, and this was really the lucky break in this whole process, was at around about the same time as the Boxer broadcast, the Brainiac clip came out. There was also a properly done scientific experiment on asking the same question, can you smell fear? So I'm able to compare and contrast the poor way in which Richard Hammond proves that you can smell fear and something here which is much more nuanced but more appropriate. So they get to feeling for experimental design, and again, that's available as a published paper. And then lastly, just think a bit about use of full programs. And so one example where I use a full program has been this second episode in the series The Cell with Adam Rutherford, where he looks at the chemistry of life. So it's looking at the history of the discovery that DNA is the genetic material. And it's a very nice program. It lasts a full hour, so I used it in a double lecture slot with first-year students. And as I said, it's a beautiful walk really through the history of going from the first discovery of nucleic acid through to how we were able to demonstrate that is the genetic material and some of the more recent experiments in that whole area. So when I was using this in a session, I had the students, I gave them a sheet, a fairly simple sheet, just to keep their attention, partly because, unfortunately, one of the difficulties with this program was that it didn't include the names on the screen of the people they were talking about. And so I included the names of the scientists with some sections to keep some notes about what they'd seen and heard. And I would say in terms of use of full programs, it is a tricky thing and possibly an inappropriate thing to do for full face-to-face sessions. One of the issues I highlighted there is that lecture slots tend to be 50 minutes, programs are frequently a 60-minute program, and so it's hard to fit that into the available time. I was fortunate that I had a back-to-back double lecture slot. I would see some legitimacy as well if students were saying, well, if you were overusing this sort of material, I've paid my £9,000 fees, and all you've done is show me TV programs whenever we've met. That wouldn't really be appropriate. But this does offer the potential for them now to do more of a flipped teaching type approach. So we hear about flipped teaching just now. You could require students to watch some material before they came to a face-to-face session, and the fact that it's available streamed on the Bob server means that they can all be watching it at the same time. It's not like the bad old days when there was 2 copies of the DVD in the library and you had to kind of sign them out on a rota basis. You can require all 350 students on a program to watch a particular episode and then come armed with that information. So it is useful for flipped classroom in that way. And it does also facilitate the possibility of developing viewing lists. So we're familiar with the notion of reading lists that's associated with a module, but you can also now set up viewing lists. So not necessarily things that you're requiring the students to watch, but saying, if you're interested in this aspect of what we've been doing in the face-to-face sessions, then you could go and watch particular additional videos on that same topic. So that's really where biology on the box comes in. So as I say, I'm a big enthusiast for this, but I have a suspicion that many of my colleagues are not aware that Bob exists, let alone about ways that they might use Boxer broadcasts in teaching. So what I've got then is a repository of recommended TV and to a lesser extent radio programs, which I think would be useful for bioscience teaching. And that's sometimes things I have already used myself. Other times it's things that I think they stand out to me as appropriate resources for teaching it in more general terms. And so I view the primary audience for biology on the box as being other academics, other bioscientists in UK universities. So that's who we're writing for. And as I say, it's primarily used in conjunction with Boxer Broadcast, but I do have it on an open platform blog. It's on a WordPress blog, because some of the advice and the recommendations and the reflections on some of the programs would be appropriate to people even if they didn't have Bob available to them, although clearly that is a limitation. The advice would be good, best with Bob, but if they haven't got that, they can get hold of some of these programs without that. And so therefore what I'm looking to do is to be developing best practice, to make recommendations, and so I'm keen to add metadata and keywords, perhaps things that don't crop up in the program itself. So a standard search wouldn't find that particular clip, but I know a context in which it's very useful to use that, and so I'm adding curriculum relevant keywords, if you like, which could be used to go with that. And then descriptions of usage. So as I said, not all of the clips have been used by me directly in a teaching context, but where I have done that, I've tried to explain ways in which we've used that and offer some of the resources that we've developed around and associated with the program. I say we because it has been a collaborative project. So although I've been leading this, we have had students working as producers as well, so co-producers of materials. I've had colleagues from other institutions involved as well, and we have had some graduates through our Graduate Gateway program who've worked with me as interns on this project. So this all started back in September of 2014, so I've been using materials prior to that, but I have then now been able to develop these. And here's just some examples of some of the resources that we've got, different posts. Excuse me, so some of the posts are raising awareness that a program exists. So I've not done anything in particular on this, other than flag the links to this classic David Attenborough series. We've not written individual posts on it, but I know some people still use that in thinking about botany. There are programs where I've got those additional notes that I've added, such as the one that I mentioned there. We've got situations where I'm just showing a clip from a program, or with the structured activities, such as the experimental design study. News stories. This is a sad example where somebody took the uncoupling agent 2,4-DNP as a slimming tablet, and unfortunately didn't feel much effect from the first one, took a couple more, and had reached a fatal dose. So we can use that in thinking about mitochondrial biology. This is antibiotic resistance, a collection of various stories on that topic. And then, as I say, to a lesser extent in my use, radio programs, or I sometimes repost things which have occurred somewhere else. This is a bioethics blog that I run. I produced this post when this film came out, and then since then, I've used this since it's been on television, I can now connect it to biology on the box. There are posts produced by students, posts produced by graduates, and posts produced by colleagues. So one there at Exeter, one at Leeds. There are now other disciplines developing as well. So we've got English on the box and history on the box, and it's interesting to see the subtle nuances between what people pick out. So the English on the box are much more likely to pick up radio programs than TV necessarily. And the history on the box is graduate historians actually using broadcast media as a bona fide source for source analysis in the way that they would with other literature. On the left here is an example from English on the box where what the student did was to pick out 3 representations of the same scene from Pride and Prejudice and compare what was being reflected in those. And then history on the box is they're using as a source there. Just to say thank you to the various funding that I've had from my own institution, and my thanks to the audience, the authors rather, of the different posts, and my thanks to you for listening.